Welcome to the Galactic Military Academy's most beloved torture session, also known as the Frozen Moon Survival Course. And when I say beloved, I mean it's beloved by exactly nobody except the sadistic instructors who designed it. Today's lovely vacation destination is Crystal 7, a moon so cold that liquid nitrogen would need a winter coat and thermal underwear. Picture this frozen hellscape, a barren rock orbiting a gas giant that apparently forgot to pay its heating bill. The surface temperature hovers around negative 200 degrees Celsius on a good day, and today's definitely not a good day. The atmosphere is thinner than the plot of a B-grade space opera, and the wind cuts through standard military gear like a hot knife through butter. Except the knife is frozen and the butter is also frozen and everything is frozen. Our brave alien cadets are about to learn why this course has a 90% dropout rate and a 10% please transfer me to literally anywhere else in the galaxy rate. First up, we have Zephyr, an aviary who looks like someone crossed a peacock with an anxiety attack. His species molts when stressed, which means he's about to turn this frozen wasteland into a feather pillow factory. Right now, he's checking his equipment for the 15th time while little blue and gold feathers drift around him like the world's most neurotic snow. Next, meet Grunt, a silicoid whose people evolved on a planet where rocks go to retire. He's basically a walking boulder with the personality to match, and he's never experienced actual cold before. His species regulates temperature through mineral absorption, which works great on lava planets but not so much on frozen moons where the warmest thing around is probably someone's dying breath. Finally, there's Nixie, a hydran whose aquatic ancestors clearly never planned for their descendants to visit places where water exists exclusively in solid form. She's already making concerning crackling sounds, and we haven't even left the transport yet. Her species stores water in specialized organs, which is fantastic for desert survival but turns you into a walking popsicle when the temperature drops below everything wants to kill you. Now for the humans, because of course there are humans. Captain Rex Martinez stands at the front of the group like a walking recruitment poster for why Deathworlds produce crazy people. He's grinning at the frozen landscape like it owes him money and he's here to collect. His survival instructor philosophy seems to be if hypothermia doesn't build character, you're not getting cold enough. Behind him stand Cadets Jake Snowball Peterson and Luna Isoqueen Frost, two humans who apparently volunteered for this assignment. Jake earned his nickname by starting snowball fights during combat training on 3 different planets. Luna got hers by somehow turning every cold weather exercise into her personal winter wonderland. They're both looking at Crystal 7 like it's a theme park instead of a frozen death trap. All right, ladies and gentlemen and sentient mineral deposits, Captain Martinez announces, but his breath-forming clouds that instantly freeze and fall to the ground like tiny ice sculptures. Welcome to paradise. For the next 48 hours, this lovely moon will be your home, your enemy, and possibly your grave. Try not to die before lunch tomorrow. It makes the paperwork complicated. 20 minutes into what was supposed to be a routine don't die from cold exercise, the emergency klaxons start blaring like the galaxy's most obnoxious alarm clock. Apparently the weather monitoring system decided this would be a great time to announce that a massive ice storm was heading their way. Not just any ice storm, mind you, but the kind that meteorologists describe using words like unprecedented and catastrophic. And maybe we should have checked the forecast before sending cadets to a frozen death moon. The alien cadets immediately shift into crisis mode, which for their species means activating every emergency protocol ever invented, and then inventing a few new ones just to be safe. Zephyr starts molting so aggressively that he looks like he's been attacked by a pillow fight referee. Grunt begins calculating survival odds using advanced silicoid mathematics, which mostly involves stacking rocks in increasingly worried patterns. Nixie makes a sound like someone stepping on bubble wrap, except the bubble wrap is made of ice and it's inside her respiratory system. Meanwhile, the humans respond to impending doom by immediately getting into an argument about architectural choices. We should build an igloo, Jake announces, already scooping up snow with his bare hands like frostbite is just a suggestion. Classic design, time-tested, practically builds itself. Snow cave is more efficient, Luna counters, eyeing a nearby drift like she's planning to redecorate it. Better insulation, less wind exposure, and we can add a chimney system for proper ventilation. Captain Martinez nods approvingly while the transport ship's pilot comes over the comm system with news that's about as welcome as a tax audit. Unable to maintain orbit in storm conditions. Extraction postponed indefinitely. Good luck down there. Try not to become ice sculptures. The communication system dies with a sound like electronic gargling, leaving them completely cut off from the outside universe. The temperature is dropping so fast that the environmental suit's heating systems are basically crying for help. We're talking flash freeze your eyeballs if you blink too long levels of cold. Zephyr loses another layer of feathers and starts making calculations about how long his remaining plumage will provide insulation. Grunt discovers that even rocks can develop what humans might call the shivers, though he insists it's just thermal oscillation compensation. Nixie's crackling sounds are getting more frequent and concerning, like someone's making popcorn inside a freezer. The storm hits the horizon like a wall of white death, moving fast enough that you can actually watch your remaining life expectancy decrease in real time. Wind speeds that would make hurricanes jealous, snow thick enough to walk on, and temperatures that are apparently trying to set some kind of record for most hostile to biological life. And what do the humans do in response to this approaching apocalypse? Jake starts a snowball fight with Luna to get the blood flowing and maintain core body temperature. They're laughing and hurling chunks of ice at each other while the aliens huddle together and begin what sounds suspiciously like funeral preparations. "This is it," Zephyr whispers, down to his last few feathers. "This is how our service records end. It's death by recreational snow combat, while humans laugh in the face of thermal dynamics." Captain Martinez watches his human cadets pelting each other with frozen projectiles and nods with what can only be described as professional pride. Good instincts. Movement generates heat, competition increases heart rate, and laughter releases endorphins. Plus, if we're all going to die horribly, might as well have fun with it. The storm arrives with the subtlety of a freight train colliding with a brass band. Visibility drops to approximately your own nose if you're lucky, and the wind starts making sounds like it's personally offended by the concept of life. While the storm turns their little corner of Crystal 7 into a frozen hellscape that would make Absolute Zero feel inadequate, the cultural differences between species become more apparent than a neon sign in a blackout. The aliens, being sensible creatures who evolved on planets where survival didn't require constant creativity, immediately implement their species' time-tested emergency protocols. Zephyr huddles into the most aerodynamic position possible, conserving every calorie while his remaining feathers provide what insulation they can. He's running thermal efficiency calculations in his head and rationing his movements like each gesture costs him a year of life. Grunt stacks himself into a formation designed to minimize surface area exposure, turning into what looks like a very worried pile of rocks. Nixie curls into a ball and slows her metabolism to barely above technically still alive, making crackling sounds at precisely timed intervals to maintain minimum necessary biological functions. Their approach is mathematically sound, scientifically proven, and absolutely logical. It's also boring as watching paint dry in a vacuum, which is probably why the humans immediately decide to ignore everything they learned in survival training and start improving their situation. Jake begins construction of what he cheerfully calls a tactical snow fortress, which sounds military and professional until you realize he's building it with the enthusiasm of a 6-year-old who just discovered sandcastles. He's not just piling snow randomly, though. Oh no, that would be too simple. He's engineering this thing with structural supports, defensive positions, and what appears to be a planning room complete with snow furniture. Load-bearing walls are key, he explains to nobody in particular while the aliens stare in horror. You want interlocking blocks for stability, proper drainage for melt-off, and strategic firing positions in case we need to defend our position from hostile ice formations. Luna, not to be outdone in the creative interpretation of survival priorities department, decides that their biggest problem isn't the deadly cold or the complete isolation, but their lack of proper heating. So naturally, she starts a fire using methods that violate approximately 3 galactic safety regulations and at least 2 laws of physics. She's gathered materials that technically shouldn't burn in this atmosphere, arranged them in a pattern that definitely wasn't covered in any survival manual, and somehow created a flame that burns hot enough to melt snow from 6 feet away. The aliens watch this display with the kind of fascination usually reserved for watching someone juggle live grenades. Fire management is all about understanding your fuel sources and oxygen flow, Luna explains while casually violating the principles of safe combustion. You need to create a thermal pocket that maximizes heat output while minimizing resource consumption. Also, always build your fire pit with proper ventilation channels so you don't accidentally gas yourself with carbon monoxide. Captain Martinez observes these developments with the pride of a parent watching their children successfully navigate their first demolitions project. He starts sharing helpful survival tips that sound less like advice and more like instructions for elaborate suicide. Remember, cadets, when you're dealing with extreme cold, the key is to stay active. Blood circulation is life circulation. If your fingers start going numb, try some jumping jacks. If your toes lose feeling, do some squats. If your brain starts shutting down from hypothermia, that's when you know you're really getting the full experience. The temperature differential between the two groups becomes increasingly obvious. The aliens are conserving every bit of thermal energy with scientific precision, barely moving, barely breathing, turning themselves into biological hibernation experiments. The humans are generating heat through what can only be described as weaponized enthusiasm, constantly moving, constantly building, constantly finding new ways to turn a survival crisis into an engineering challenge. Zephyr manages to whisper through chattering beak, are they actually immune to cold, or are they just too insane to notice they're dying? Grunt's response sounds like gravel in a blender. I'm beginning to suspect those aren't mutually exclusive options. What started as practical shelter construction quickly escalates into something that would make military engineers weep with either pride or terror, depending on their personal relationship with structural safety regulations. The humans, apparently deciding that basic survival is for amateurs, have transformed their modest shelter project into what can only be described as competing winter architectural masterpieces. Jake's tactical snow fortress has evolved beyond all recognition. We're talking about a multi-level complex complete with ramparts, defensive positions, and what appears to be a strategic planning room furnished entirely with snow furniture. He's carved windows for optimal visibility, created storage compartments for supplies, and built what he calls rapid deployment snowball ammunition stations at key defensive points. You see, Jake explains while adding decorative battlements that serve no practical purpose, the key to effective winter fortification is thinking three-dimensionally. Ground level for basic operations, elevated positions for surveillance and defensive fire, and underground storage for resource security. Plus, you always want redundant entry and exit points in case of siege conditions. Luna, refusing to be outdone in the creative interpretation of survival architecture competition, has constructed what she calls her Ice Palace Command Center. It's got multiple rooms, a functioning chimney system that somehow doesn't collapse the roof, and interior lighting provided by her physics-defying fire that she's managed to channel through ice tubes without melting them. Thermal management is all about controlling heat flow, she says, while adding what can only be described as ice sculptures to her entryway. You want to capture and redirect heat energy while maintaining structural integrity. Also, aesthetic considerations are important for morale. If you're going to be trapped somewhere, it might as well look good. The alien cadets have given up trying to understand human logic and have moved into what can best be described as anthropological documentation mode. They're watching this display with the fascination of scientists observing a completely new form of life that defies everything they thought they knew about physics, biology, and basic sanity. The storm outside is howling like it's personally offended by the concept of shelter, but with wind speeds that would relocate small buildings and temperatures that are actively trying to break the laws of thermodynamics. Ice crystals are forming so fast they sound like tiny machine guns, and the visibility is approximately your own hands if you hold them really, really close to your face. And in the middle of this frozen apocalypse, the humans are having a debate about architectural aesthetics. "That's not a command center, that's a fancy igloo with delusions of grandeur," Jake calls out while adding what appears to be a snow garage to his fortress. Says the guy who built a fort that looks like it was designed by someone who's never seen actual military architecture. But Luna fires back while installing what can only be described as ice art installations around her palace. Captain Martinez watches this escalating construction competition with the satisfaction of someone whose teaching methods have achieved exactly their intended result. Outstanding work, cadets. Remember, in survival situations, morale is just as important as shelter. If you're going to survive, you might as well do it in style. The temperature outside drops to levels that would make liquid helium feel inadequate, but inside the human constructions, it's actually approaching merely freezing instead of instant death. The aliens huddle together in their mathematically optimized survival formation, burning calories at the minimum sustainable rate and trying not to die from hypothermia. Meanwhile, the humans have moved beyond basic construction and into what can only be called infrastructure development. Jake is working on connecting his fortress to Luna's palace via what he calls strategic snow tunnels, while Luna is experimenting with advanced ice engineering techniques that probably violate several conservation laws. The emergency becomes secondary to what the humans have dubbed the Great Snowfort War, which isn't actually a war so much as a friendly competition to see who can build the most impressively over-engineered winter survival facility. They're sliding down ice slopes they've built for tactical mobility testing, having contests to see who can build the tallest snow tower without it collapsing, and generally treating the whole deadly frozen wasteland situation like it's some kind of extreme sports vacation. Nixie manages to croak out through her increasingly frequent crackling sounds, "I'm documenting this for my final thesis. Human Survival Strategies, How Deathworld Species Turn Crisis into Recreation." Zephyr, down to his last 3 feathers and running on pure spite, whispers, assuming any of us survive to read it. The storm reaches what meteorologists would probably classify as apocalyptic with a chance of absolute doom, assuming any meteorologists were crazy enough to study weather patterns on frozen death moons. Wind speeds have achieved relocate mountains status, the temperature has dropped to make absolute zero look tropical, and ice crystals are forming so aggressively that they're basically conducting aerial warfare against anything stupid enough to be outside. This is, naturally, when the humans finish their winter construction projects and decide it's time for morale-boosting activities. Jake's tactical snow fortress has reached final form, a multi-story complex that would make actual military engineers weep with confused pride. It's got defensive positions, storage areas, living quarters, and what he calls a strategic snowball ammunition depot that contains approximately 3,000 perfectly spherical ice projectiles organized by size, density, and what he calls tactical impact potential. Luna's Ice Palace Command Center looks like something a crazy person would build if they had engineering degrees and no concept of reasonable limits. Multiple rooms connected by ice hallways, a functioning ventilation system, interior lighting that somehow works, and decorative elements that serve absolutely no survival purpose but look fantastic. And now, with the storm at peak everything wants to kill you intensity, they decide this is the perfect time for organized recreational activities. "All right, team," Captain Martinez announces while the aliens prepare for what they assume will be their final moments. Storm's getting serious, which means it's time for some team-building exercises. Peterson, you're running point on the ice sculpture competition. Frost, I want you organizing what we'll call Winter Obstacle Course Alpha. The aliens stare in disbelief as the humans start moving around like the deadly storm outside is just background noise. Jake begins setting up an ice sculpture contest with categories like most creative use of frozen materials and best representation of abstract concepts in ice medium. Luna starts designing what can only be described as a frozen obstacle course complete with sliding sections, climbing challenges, and what appears to be ice hurdles. Physical activity generates heat, Captain Martinez explains cheerfully while the wind outside sounds like it's trying to file a noise complaint against the concept of existence. Movement increases circulation, competition raises heart rate, and group activities improve team cohesion. Plus, if we're all going to be stuck here for a while, we might as well make it interesting. The human body heat generated through constant movement, shared activities, and what can only be described as aggressive optimism starts creating a thermal bubble around their winter complex. The aliens, who have been conserving energy through minimal movement and mathematical precision, discover that their scientifically sound approach is actually less effective than the human method of generate heat through weaponized fun. Zephyr, down to his last feather and running on fumes, gets pulled into Jake's ice sculpture competition despite his protests. Grunt finds himself reluctantly participating in Luna's obstacle course because apparently his rock-based physiology makes him ideal for the structural integrity testing portion. Nixie gets recruited as a judge for various competitions because her crackling sounds can be interpreted as either approval or criticism depending on the context. The moment of realization hits them all at once. The humans aren't just surviving the storm, they're thriving in it. Their constant activity, shared body heat, group cooperation, and relentless positivity have created a survival environment that's actually superior to the aliens' energy conservation methods. The mathematical precision and scientific protocols that should work better in theory are being outperformed by what can only be described as organized chaos with thermal benefits. They turned a survival crisis into a winter sports festival, Zephyr whispers, his voice filled with a mixture of awe and existential confusion. They're not just surviving, they're having fun. Just as the aliens begin to understand that human insanity might actually be advanced survival strategy, the storm starts to break. Rescue ships appear on the horizon like metallic angels coming to save them from their frozen predicament. The rescue team finds the alien cadets barely alive, suffering from various degrees of hypothermia and what appears to be profound psychological confusion. They find the humans arguing about whether they should dismantle their snow constructions or leave them as a monument to human engineering excellence for future survival classes. "Do we really have to leave?" Jake asks, looking at his tactical fortress like a parent watching their child go off to college. "We were just getting started on Phase 2 of the Winter Development Project. I hadn't finished the advanced thermal management systems," Luna adds, patting her ice palace like it's a beloved pet. "Give me another week and I could have had central heating running through the whole complex." Captain Martinez nods approvingly while the rescue medics try to understand how the humans are not only alive but apparently disappointed that their frozen death experience is ending. Back at the Galactic Military Academy's medical bay, the aftermath of the Crystal 7 incident reads like a case study in how different species define survival. The alien cadets are receiving treatment for various degrees of hypothermia, frostbite, and what the medical staff politely describes as acute exposure to human survival methodologies. The humans are in the next bay over, complaining to anyone who will listen about having to abandon their awesome snow base just when it was getting good. Zephyr sits wrapped in 17 thermal blankets, his feathers slowly growing back while he stares at the ceiling with the 1,000-yard stare of someone who has seen things that challenge the fundamental nature of reality. His medical report lists hypothermia, severe feather loss, and what the psychologist describes as existential confusion regarding human survival instincts. Grunt has been placed under heat lamps to restore his mineral core temperature, but he keeps making sounds like gravel in a cement mixer, which the doctors interpret as either pain or profound philosophical distress. His species has never had to develop words for bewildered amazement at Deathworld inhabitants, so he's basically stuck making confused rock noises. Nixie has been placed in a specialized thermal recovery unit to prevent the water in her system from refreezing, but she keeps making her crackling sounds in what the medical staff has determined is actually a form of laughter. She's apparently found the whole experience so absurd that her species' equivalent of hysteria involves sounding like someone's making popcorn. Meanwhile, in the next bay, Jake and Dove Luna are giving the medical staff detailed explanations of their construction techniques while simultaneously lobbying to return to Crystal 7 to finish what they started. The thermal efficiency ratios we achieved were incredible, Jake explains enthusiastically while a medic checks him for frostbite and finds none. With a few more days, we could have had a fully functional winter survival complex that could house an entire platoon. The ice engineering possibilities alone justify a return expedition. Luna adds while her core body temperature reads as completely normal despite spending 3 days in conditions that should have killed her. I was just figuring out how to create a geothermal tap using nothing but compressed snow and strategic airflow. The official incident report becomes a masterpiece of bureaucratic confusion as the Academy staff tries to explain how a routine survival exercise turned into what appears to have been a winter vacation for the human participants. The report goes through 17 drafts before they settle on language that won't get them all fired for incompetence. Incident summary. Extreme weather conditions resulted in extended isolation of mixed species cadet group. Alien participants experienced standard hypothermic stress responses consistent with species physiology. Human participants constructed elaborate temporary structures and engaged in recreational activities. All personnel recovered successfully. Human methods proved unexpectedly effective despite apparent violation of established survival protocols. The aliens file official requests for species-specific survival training, having learned that human survival methods involve what Zephyr describes in his report as weaponizing recreational activities for thermal advantage. Grunt's report, translated from confused rock language, essentially says humans are crazy but crazy works. Nixie's report recommends studying human cold weather psychology for potential military applications. Captain Martinez receives commendations for his innovative training methods and a request to develop advanced cold weather operations protocols based on human survival instinct utilization. The aliens get assigned to tropical planet training exercises, having demonstrated that their species aren't quite ready for the advanced course in Deathworld inhabitant survival strategies. The final revelation comes during the Academy debrief when Captain Martinez casually mentions that this wasn't even the worst thing humans have done during routine training exercises. There was apparently an incident on a lava planet where humans turned a volcanic eruption survival course into a competitive extreme sports event. And something involving a toxic swamp world that resulted in humans accidentally discovering 3 new forms of antibiotics while having what they called jungle adventure fun time. The alien cadets exchange looks that convey a mixture of respect, terror, and profound gratitude that humans are on their side in the Galactic Military Alliance. The incident report gets filed under Human Behavioral Studies, Why Deathworld Species Make Effective Military Assets Despite Apparent Psychological Instability. And somewhere in the Academy archives a note gets added to the human species profile. Survival instinct manifests as recreational creativity. Do not assume distress when humans appear to be enjoying life-threatening situations. This is normal behavior for Deathworld inhabitants and should be considered tactical advantage rather than psychological disorder. The legend of Crystal 7 becomes part of Academy folklore, told to new alien cadets as both inspiration and warning, with inspiration that humans make excellent allies in impossible situations, and warning that serving alongside humans means your definition of impossible situation will require constant updating.